Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eighth episode of season two of This, That, and the Other. My name is Varun Chandramohan, your host for today. Now, This, That, and the Other is a series that tackles some of the biggest and most debated topics that both managers and employees encounter in their professional and personal lives. Now, so far in the series, we've explored topics such as the pursuit of happiness and if it was a fool's dream or a possibility. We've explored longevity and whether it was down to genetics or choice, bias in the workplace, when personal life choices collide with your professional life, office politics and the art of sucking up, disruptive HR practices, expats and trailing spouses. And just last week, we spoke about good parenting while climbing the corporate ladder, and we looked at if both can be done equally. Now, on today's show, we are going to explore if patience, attitude, and grit can be learned. And we're going to also look at these three qualities from the perspective from a manager or an employee in the corporate world. Now, just a reminder to everyone, all our past episodes of This, That, and the Other and our other webinar series are available on Luminary Learning Solutions YouTube page. So do swing by our page and don't forget to like our videos and hit that subscribe button. All right, it's time to introduce my guest. First up, she's a leadership coach and a strategist, a certified diversity and belonging facilitator, and a certified culture facilitator. She's currently the founder and chief executive of the Purpose Walk. Wendy Woolfolk is here with us today. Hello, Wendy. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Varun, and thank you. It's great to be here.
The pleasure is ours, Wendy. And finally, she's a multi-award winning doctor, thought leader, innovator, and entrepreneur. She's currently a partner and executive board member at the Dana Group. Dr. Ruchi Dana is here with us today. Hello, Dr. Ruchi. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Varun. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting.
The pleasure is ours. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Now, in the best interest of our audience, I wanted to start off our conversation by asking my panel about these three qualities: patience, attitude, and grit. How common are they in today's world? Especially the corporate world. And I'd like to start with you, Ruchi. What do you think? Are patience, attitude, and grit becoming extant, or are they widespread in today's world and the corporate world in particular?
Yeah, thank you, Varun, for that excellent question. I think it all depends quite a lot on the company cultures as well and how people are learning. And in fact, even these three qualities are completely different from each other. So for once, I can say patience is one thing that people are losing these days. There are not many patient people. In fact, this is a world of instant gratification. So the moment you come across any bad things at work, like a criticism or something, instead of being patient and all, they would just shut off or react in the moment. And what they would rather do is go on Facebook, post a picture of your little cute kitten and get 100 likes. So that's the world of instant gratification that everybody is living in. So I think that has affected the patients quite a lot, because they don't want to even negotiate or understand each other, because everything happens in such an instant world that people are looking forward for instant gratification, instant pleasure, the dopamine effect. So these are studies that have been around for a while, but this is a time where especially in times of COVID-19, everything is virtual. People have so much more access to the online social
Sure.
media and all of that. So I think it's affecting patients in a very negative way. About grit and attitude, I would say because a lot of startups are coming up, so I think grit is something that is increasing. And the reason for that is because a lot of people are really passionate about startups, and they know they come across a new idea, they fail, they come across a new idea, then they pivot, or they are unable to raise funding. And there's so many struggles that come across in startup entrepreneurs life. So I think grit is something that is sort of increasing, but in the corporate world, again, a lot of corporates are now having this culture of startups and having their own innovation hubs and all. So I think that's one way to actually increase grit in the employees as well. I think we are on a good path there. Attitude again
Right.
like depends on like the company and how safe it is for the employees to make mistakes, because oftentimes like if it's a very strict culture, then employees like sort of feel like they cannot go beyond they cannot do out of the box thinking and all. So I think that affects the attitude quite a lot. So it all depends on like what kind of company culture is out there and
Sure.
things, but like patience is one thing that's definitely reducing.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Ruchi. Wendy, what are your thoughts on it? What do you think?
Yeah, fascinating question. I think that the answer is a little bit contradictory. I
Sure.
think in a networked world with information, there's a lot of awareness about the essential qualities to succeed in the 21st century. I think there's also a lot of distraction, and
Sure.
and certainly this global pandemic and being in lockdown has exacerbated people's tension. It's made it difficult for people to be patient. On the other hand, there's a lot at stake, and to recognize that the ability to have a successful career, to be taken seriously in organizations, is a function of how you show up. And
Yeah.
so while we're buffeted by these tensions and the challenges of our time, there is, I think, significant awareness about the importance of these abilities.
Sure.
In my work with organizations and a lot of the focus on culture and diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging and people's awareness and their ability to use their voices, there's a lot of push for people showing up armed with these abilities, and the practice of mindfulness, for example, gets a lot of attention.
Right.
This notion of cultivating attention and being deliberate about how you operate, how you engage. It's a challenge, but I think people are succeeding. I think the other influence on this too is geography. Where in the world are we? And I think in the West, the demands are outsized. And I think I'm originally from Guyana. We're a little bit behind the eight ball, but recognizing the importance of developing these kinds of capabilities.
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Wendy. Wendy, I just wanted to ask you this. It'll be it's so appropriate to bring it up. I mean, you're in the U.S. and ballots are being counted right now, and we're talking about patience, and everybody's been saying, be patient while the ballot. But I mean, it's obviously the stakes are high. Everyone's all sort of riled up, and so on. But then, do you think? The leaders of, or whether it's a corporate world or whether it's politicians or whether it's those influencers in the society, especially when they send out the message saying, no, we cannot wait for a few days, despite the election being very different this time. Do you think that bleeds into the corporate world, bleeds into your daily life? And Dr. Ruchi brought up a very good point of instant gratification, and we are lucky in our part of the world, we don't have overnight delivery. Even if we need a book, we got to be prepared to wait 21 days, till it arrives. But I did study in the US, and I know what it's like to click a button and then get a book by the evening or next day. So and I can imagine how difficult it must be to now all of a sudden start to wait for things. What do you think, Wendy? Are these external influences bleeding into the corporate world? Are we seeing this affecting the young and the experienced? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a meaty question that I love, because I have been complaining in my writings and in my interactions about how the administration's values, the current administration, is bleeding into the society, right? Influencing our societal values and behaviors. There is a coarseness that's a part of the current president. It's in his choice of language. It's in the name calling and some of his posture. And he has normalized some bad behaviors that are a little more prevalent now. And so absolutely, this stuff breeds into societal values. And then people show up in the workplace armed with a lot of these bad habits and influencing the culture and making the work for people like me a little more difficult.
Sure.
There is no question.
Sure, Wendy. And Dr. Ruchi, what about what have you seen in your experience, in your immediate environment, community? Have you seen this influencing, whether it's whether it's local authorities or whether it's the foreign influence? Have you seen this get bled into the corporate world? And
Yeah, that's actually absolutely true, Arun, because like and apart from these factors, there are a lot of other factors as well. Like there's a lot of glooming insecurity about jobs, and like
Sure.
there's so much anxiety about job losses, uncertainty about the future with what's happening in the elections and with COVID-19 and all of things. And so many industries are affected in a very bad way. Like for example, events companies or travel and also like I think like overall the world together is going through a very tough phase, and
Sure.
it's like things like these are just like adding up to it. I think like that's the reason we are seeing a lot of mental well-being apps and all being really adopted at the moment, because like even though people used to think about these things back in the days as well, but now suddenly everybody's getting some time to reflect on their own lives, and also they're like trying to take up some good habits and trying to explore mental well-being as well. I think that's something that has come to the limelight now. So I think that these factors have definitely influenced things for the bad. But one of the things is that people are not now much more aware about these things, and they're trying to take action on that.
Right, absolutely, spot on. I think I absolutely agree with you. And I actually this reminds me of a joke. I believe it's Will Ferrell who said, if you want to marry a person, you should make them use a computer with slow internet first to see what they're really like. And it just reminded me of that. So I have a very tough question to ask. When we're talking about patients and when we're talking about the real life, like the world has changed, and like you said, apps and so on, like so many apps to try and improve your productivity, improve your well-being, and so on. But they've also kind of obviously these apps. I mean, if you take a small segment like dating. I was I'll admit it. I was a socially awkward person, not so good with girls. But it was a nerve-wracking thing. Like you had to walk up, you had to get the number, you had to. But now it's like online. You swipe left, swipe right, and you expect things to you expect to go from 0 to 60 like really fast. Now in this climate, and so this is the question. So in this kind of climate, how do you develop patience? How do you develop the habits that would go on? And I'm sure it's very difficult. I mean, if you're not used to especially if you didn't live during a time where you had to go get stuff on your own, you have to go to a library, go through the shelves, pick up every book, and now it's just and so any thoughts on that, Dr. Ruchi? How do you develop?
Yeah, and just commenting on the dating websites, I think like a lot of my single friends are really frustrated this year because like even though there are dating websites and all, but like you cannot really like it's almost like an entire year is getting wasted, right? Like if the people that are single, and that's actually adding to the anxiety and all of that. So recently I was speaking at a mental well-being webinar, and the conclusion mainly was like in times of COVID-19, one of the things that has affected positively is like you have a better routine. You don't have to come to work. You don't have to travel so much. So you sort of save some time.
Mm.
And initially there were like issues in corporate world, like the employees would ask the HR that, oh, I don't have a narrow corner or a place to set my desk and all, and people used to like buy their desk and all of that. Now there's a new struggle that people are saying that the moment I roll out of bed, I'm into my workplace. So there's not much of work-life balance. But still, I think like if there are some sort of like regulations that are put up by companies, like to limit the amount of Zoom calls and screen time and all of that, then people can actually develop a very good discipline and have like a very fixed calendar about like having some time for yourself, for meditation and for exercise and all of those things. Because I think like this is a time to actually reflect back on like how you have lived your life in the past and how things can change almost instantaneously, and this is the new normal. Like this would happen in the near future. Like today we are seeing a digital age, maybe tomorrow we'll see a robotic age. So
Sure.
it's and things happen so quickly. So it's really important to reflect back about what is it that you really want in your life, and finding out your why. I think that's really important. Once you find that, it gives you some sort of peace, and then you can actually work on baby steps to get there. And like having a proper discipline, having like non-negotiable times for yourself, for your mental well-being, for like maybe listening to podcasts, like watching some good videos online and things like that. And there are a number of online courses. There's so many resources available to everybody these days. I think, but it's important not to get distracted by a lot of information because there's so
Sure.
much available these days. But
Correct.
if you follow like some sort of set patterns and work on the discipline, I think that would help quite a lot in developing patience, because that's one way to like think about things. Like this is an hour block where I'll just like maybe reflect on my life or write a journal or things like that. I think that's something that would like affect your life in the long term. And initially it would be like really a big struggle to like sit without a mobile phone or anything for an hour. But
Right.
like you can start with small steps and like work towards it. But I think like that's something that would be there to stay in your life. And if you like look at the really successful people, they always have a journal, and they have times and blocks of time set for themselves, set for exercise, set for like mental well-being and all of that. I think like that's really important, because like the world is so crazy. It changes at such a fast pace. Even companies are unsure like what would happen, like how to change their policies. And also I think like as employees, as people, as individuals, it's really important to make yourself much more
Sure.
resilient and have that grit in yourself.
Absolutely. And Dr. Rishi, before I move on to Wendy, I believe we have Iman with us. Just to introduce her to the audience, she's an experienced director with demonstrated history of working in the mechanical and industrial engineering industry. She currently serves as a director at Robert Bosch in UK. Iman Martin is here with us today. Hello, Iman. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for the delay.
Oh, not a problem.
It's
Did I
4
pronounce your
in
name
the
right?
morning.
All right. Good morning then. Did I pronounce your name right, Iman?
Yes, mine is correct. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. All right. All right, Iman. So on that thought, so we were just talking about patience, and we were just wrapping up on the topic of patience. And I'm going to move to Wendy and to hear her thoughts on how we could develop patience in this world of instant gratification, and then we'll come to you for your thoughts. And Wendy, any thoughts on how one might go about developing this so that they can build patience, and both to be used inside the corporate world and outside in their personal lives?
You know, I think two things are making it necessary. I think the stress of the times and the fast pace, Dr. Ruchi referenced, the pace of change and all of that. Survival demands that we have a degree of balance, that we live with some intentionality. This notion of understanding your why, again, Dr. Ruchi talked about. My company is called the Purpose Walk. Purpose is a huge part of my focus and my work with my clients. And I think people who are in tune with and anchored to their why and their purpose are able to be deliberate and intentional. And then those who are knocked upside down by the chaos of the current times, their survival and some sense of equilibrium is dictating that we slow down, we develop some patience, because otherwise we feel like we're going to lose our heads.
Sure.
I do believe that these are learnable skills.
Right.
And I think that the world we're in, the times we're in, and or sometimes unfortunate, ugly experiences demand that we slow down and tap into some patience.
Right.
Virtually every living being around the world is working, operating in a dispersed team, right?
Sure.
Everyone is not reporting to a certain address in a given building anymore. And it's likely that in the what I call the altered normal, we're not going back to that. And so
Yeah.
it means that all of these abilities become really, really important. I think the times demand it, and our ability to survive and rise above the chaos we're experiencing
Yeah.
makes it necessary.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that, Wendy. Iman, any thoughts on how you would go about developing patience?
Yes, I think it's really inspiring to hear both of my colleagues. It's definitely, if we, when I'm talking about myself, also for patients, pre-COVID, and I'm sure you all have the same experience, we had to dress up, take the train, myself commute to London for an hour, and then your day starts, you hardly had a breakfast, you go around in almost polluted environment, and then you have to go back again, and then you have a 5 hour sleeps, etc. This cycle, all of a sudden, with COVID, broke. So some people then thought, I am one of them, will climb the walls because we are changing the pattern what we had, which doesn't mean that it's a good pattern. It's like Wendy said, you're slowing down. You are forced to slow down. And not only that, is the whole community slowing down. There are positiveness happened of this, that you are forced to learn patience and you're forced to actually reflect on things differently. So in that perception, people reflected on, like, Dr. Rishi said, on their well-being, on their environment, financial situation, some of them worrying about the financial situations from the corporate world, some worrying about their jobs, but some they really fitted nicely their life. They're buying locally, they change their pattern, they're finding ways of living better. And the society, although economically we are may go in recession in a global term, but that also will bring the experience to be patient. Agreeing also that we may be born with patience, but also the reflections of our environment and the way how we raised does reflect on this descriptions of our personality. And I think, in my opinion, and I'm seeing a lot of people with mental illnesses, like Dr. Rishi said, that the really question is, what do you want to achieve in your life? And I think this is a reflection again of having a long-term targets, which will bring patience and passions in your life. So I think it's really difficult questions to answer in one go, but I definitely agree with my colleagues.
Oh, absolutely. Let me ask you a tough question. If there is, so I would like to ask all my panelists, if there is one thing or one activity that you could do to build patience, what would it be? Personally, I would probably pick reading a book. I see that it's rarely being done now. If anybody wants to know anything, they read an article online, they Google it, but the whole I mean, many of my friends, and including myself until recently, the last books that we've read was back in college, and like proper cover to cover, go through everything, make notes, so I would pick reading a book. But if you would pick one activity that would help you build your patience, what would that be?
Yoga. Really will advise everyone to do yoga. I know it's not in our culture, it's probably more in the Asian culture. Is the best thing what you could do. It's really calming. It's force you to be even patient with your meditation and the way how you exercise. And also reading, Varun, you absolutely nailed it. Reading is great, but I think yoga, you start to deal with yourself, and also with your inner thinking and ideas and all of this.
Sure. Dr. Rishi, Wendy, one activity to build patience?
The idea of working with youth, I love it, and I think it's centering.
Right.
And I think that, donating your time and working as a mentor forces you to be deliberate and focused and patient. And so I would say that, and coupled with, I think, lectures, listening to lectures and
Sure.
Educational content.
Right. Okay. Fantastic, Wendy. And Dr. Ruchi?
Yeah, I think meditation is really like what has worked for me, and there's something called as Vipassana. It's like some people have really changed after going through that experience. I think that, like these are things that really work, but it all depends on your personal behavior and culture and all of this. So like if meditation is not there, then like there are also like there are different apps for calm music and all of that, relaxation apps. I think that could work for some people, but at least like having like a habit of writing a journal or reflecting on yourself, on like all the actions, like what was it that made you angry the previous day, or like, because like these are small things in which like if you just reflect back or maybe get some honest feedback from your close circle of friends and family, then you'll be able to understand like what is it like it's maybe like a thing like you say certain words but they are perceived by other people in a completely different way. So you'll only learn that by getting feedback from others. So at Stanford, I remember there was a class called Touchy Feely, in which like there was no agenda, and we would all sit in a circle and just let's talk about things, and then everybody would give feedback. And like it was a very diverse class, so people were there from different cultures, different countries. So it was really shocking to see like how people would perceive things in a completely different way. Like the person who says things doesn't mean it in that way, but like the other person thinks about things, because there's so many biases and everything that comes into play. So I think like just reflecting onto your life and like what is it that's not working, and why is it that you like lose your temper, or just getting like some rounds of feedback from your friends and family, like, and taking them in a good light and taking them in bits and pieces, because at times like the people who are not really patient, they cannot really handle criticism. So that's one thing that's
Absolutely.
again very difficult to think about. But like having this habit of just reflecting on small things and working towards that, I think that would be a good start.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That's good advice. All right, so I think we should move on to attitude, our next rather characteristic. Now, speaking of attitude, I think we need to come clean. I think the current generation and the generations that are about to come, they're very spoiled. They're absolutely spoiled. Which reminds me another joke. There was this comedian Louis C.K. He was telling this story about a man, or rather when he was flying. Planes or rather airlines had just introduced high-speed internet on planes, and then it was working well. He was thrilled with it, and then it stopped working, and the guy next to him just went and just said, "This is nonsense." And then he said he was thinking to himself, "You are in a machine that's flying. You're literally in a chair in the sky, and you have internet, and you're complaining about that." And so obviously it was a joke, and it was meant to be a part of his stand-up routine, but that says a lot about attitude. And so I want to ask, do people have the wrong attitude, or are they being spoiled, or is the environment creating that whole issue with attitude? This is open to the panel. Who would like to take a stab at this question?
I'm happy to kick off.
Sure.
It's a great it's a great question. I will relate before I get into descriptions of attitude. I will say it's a generation issue, and I really see that. I'm not millennial. So I see a huge attitude difference between the baby boomers, generation X, and then the millennials. And I see that, for example, from my team staff, where there is no patience in the younger generation, the current generation. They had, in comparison to maybe the older generation, the computer, it's really now having an app or having an iPhone is like you are entitled to have it anyway. So they have different lifestyle, and it's an incident in seconds. And they want also their careers to be an incident in seconds without actually having the journey of learning to then accelerate in their careers. So they want everything to happen yesterday. So this is what I'm seeing from the attitude of the younger generation comparison, for example, in the baby boomers or the generation, for example, post the Second World War. And I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but I think attitudes relates to the environment you're born with. It gives you the perspective of how your attitude will be. Patience and attitude all belong together to the same, in my opinion, personality aspects, where it's actually to help you to get to the grid, which probably this is the next level of what we're saying. But I think it's a really generation thing, and it's totally different. And even for the managers and the corporate world, it does influence the way how we want to deal with them, to give them the right approach for the right attitudes.
Right, and I would like to ask the rest of the panel to pitch in as well, and especially in a corporate environment, especially when you're interacting with your coworkers and your peers and so on. Surely this must be impacting teams and collaboration and so on. So yes, so Dr. Ruchi, Wendy, any thoughts on attitude? What the current status is and how it's impacting.
Yeah, just adding on to Iman's last point about about attitude in the workplaces. I think people what I've noticed at many companies is that people always start having good faith and having a good feeling about the work and all. They come up with, they show up at least with a positive attitude on the first day or two. But eventually you try to, and similarly in boards, what I've seen is when you join a new board, the new board member who joins the board, he or she is the one who's be really willing to put in the hard work and all pumped up. But eventually what happens is the culture of the company or the culture of the board, it completely changes how people develop within that board or a company. So what I've noticed is there are small nuances that come into play. For example, if somebody that is your subordinate, he comes up to you with a very good idea or something and sort of it's not appreciated in that moment. I think that's something that really it's not taken in a good faith by the other person. And then what happens is maybe the next time you're giving some instructions to the person, he's not really attentive, and then he comes up with a messed up situation. So these are small nuances that build up, and it completely changes the team dynamics and the work culture. And that's something that is really difficult to see, because if you talk about the annual reviews and all, that happen after an entire year, so you don't have much time to reflect on what actually went wrong. So I think having much more frequent video reviews is something that would work. Similarly, if you think about developing a new skill like exercise or maybe playing a new music instrument, you see initially you put in a lot of hard work, but you don't really see results, you're sort of demotivated and all. But once you play one song on a guitar, it's that moment when you just decide, okay, this is something that I've achieved and I would really want to do further. So I think that sort of recognition is really necessary in workplaces, in companies, and in boards as well. That these are things that actually drive a person's attitude to a much more positive way, because oftentimes a lot of people that are really talented, they just get ignored in the corporate culture, and maybe they have some talent, but it's not appreciated at the right moment, and that actually brings down their entire positive attitude to sort of a negative attitude, and that sinks them even further down. And then what happens is they spoil the entire company's culture, right? And that's really important for an HR team, for a company. It's really important to make sure at least the culture is such that it's a safe culture for people to make mistakes, for people to evolve, for people to grow. Similarly in boards, what I've realized is if initially if a new person comes, he has a lot of new ideas. The kind of perception he develops in the first day is really mostly it's accurate, but eventually he gets influenced by like what's happening on the board, what's happening in the company, and he tries to mold in and all, like, and the actual qualities doesn't
Sure.
really show up. So I think like that's something that I've seen happening these days as well. So like having some good corporate policies to have like regular reviews, maybe reverse engineer like how the 360-degree feedback works. I think these are things that could really work out in this way.
Sure, that's a very good point, and I would love to hear what Wendy has to say. But Wendy, I have another request. So when you're sharing your thoughts, could you also share um, uh, us or rather share with us your experience, because you have been working with the youth, and we are talking about attitude, and Dr. Ruchi brought up a good point about how the environment has such a big influence on how you build up your attitude. So in your experience, yes, so give us your thoughts on what you think, and also when you deal with the youth, and when you how do you tackle this aspect, if you see that a lack of attitude exists, then how do you tackle that? I know it's a loaded question, so you can take your time to answer. Yeah.
Sure, and I think I see a phenomenon of environmental and cultural influences rubbing up against individual responsibility taking.
Right.
And so with young people, for instance, I talk about, it's interesting, I remember Oprah Winfrey over a decade ago when she started that school in Africa, talked about the difference in young people and how children in Africa wanted shoes to go to school.
Right.
And in the West, it's like the newest iteration of the Nintendo and this, that, and the other, and the smartphone, and so on. And I think about us with me growing up in the third world, where my brother and I walked 3-4 villages to and from high school every year, every day for the 5 years of high school. And 10 out of 9 times, and my math is right, so we were fetching home empty bellies in the tropical sun. But my mother instilled a value and appreciation for education and realizing your potential. And we were sponges and we were hungry. And so when I'm dealing with youth, I talk about taking responsibility for your life, the kind of life you're going to live. Otherwise, my nephew, when he turned 18, and again when he turned 21, for example, I said to him, pay attention to your disposition. When you need a haircut, you find a barber's chair. You get to the gym to work on biceps. In the same way, figure out a way to take care of your disposition. Pay attention to guard against who you let yourself become. Stay kind, stay playful, work hard and play hard. Keep your tank full and your flame lighting bright. Be intentional about joy and about your finite time on earth. It could be 70 years, it could be 35. Make the years count. Otherwise, you might as well be a bar stool. So it is about exercising choice and really thinking about legacy. And I tell young people, you're not too young to think about what should your life represent? How do you want to be remembered? And thinking in that way influences the choices we make, the attitudes we show up with, etc. I joke sometimes with young people. I say, you should be sentenced to 6 months in a third world country to get a bit of a wake-up call.
Sure.
But I think awareness, if anything, is something I drive. Be intentional, pay attention, watch how you show up. Otherwise, tail is wagging dog.
Well said, Wendy. It's absolutely beautifully said. And I can add to that this is exactly what I meant. You see a difference between children born in Western environment or in Asia or in Africa, and it's the hunger you see in the people coming from the third world. I absolutely agree with you, Wendy, and this would be the dilemma what we are facing here. I just wanted to add one point, if I may, also about the corporate world. Is this also for the people, the younger people, if they want to enter the corporate world, they really need to think carefully, because each corporate has its own culture, and you need 3 years, 1 to 3 years until you mold into the culture. And if they don't have the patience, the startups also environment or smaller companies environment, it's more agile. And for some also individuals could be suitable rather than going to the corporate world. So this is also another thought if someone is in the first step of their careers and they're thinking they should have a considerations of entering in a smaller companies
Sure.
because they are probably maybe better suited and having more focus to your individual development rather than company with millions of employees.
Sure, absolutely. Fully agree. And Wendy, I fully endorse your 6 months. Your 6 months. And it just reminded me. It brought back so much of memory. So back in college, I had to mail something, and this was 2007, 8ish, somewhere around there, and I was at the post office in Michigan, and there were all touch screen, all of that, and there were like 5 counters, and 2 of them were closed, and there were about 7 people in the line, and this guy in front of me just turned back and just shook his head and went, United States Postal Service. And then I told him, oh, you should come to my country. None of that is there. You got to stay, and everything's like, man. Anyways, I mean, true, absolutely. I endorse that. So before we move on to grit, any one tip or activity that you would recommend to build attitude, to develop a good attitude? Anyone who would like to take a first crack at that?
This comes again to what Wendy is saying. I think is what I would recommend, and I do myself as well, is really as a young person, seek mentorship. Try to find, mentors who they can give you advice and also be, a part of your journey. And I have about 5 young people, and it's sometimes, like yesterday I had a conversation with one of them. And it wasn't about work. His sister is unfortunately developed cancer in the brain, and he was very disturbed about it, and he didn't want to talk about with his mother. So, this is also feelings needs to be unleashed as well. So, but I would really suggest, and there are lots of mentors, and I'm sure, also Wendy and Dana are more than happy to be mentors as well. So search your mentor suitable to what you need. It really helped me myself when I was in this younger positions, but I would recommend strongly.
Sure. Dr. G, Wendy, one tip, one activity, anything that they can do or start doing rather?
Yeah, I think like I have always believed, like similar to mentors, I've believed in having like a personal board. So what happens is like people who like are your friends or like your mentors and all, you can have them as a board and like have like quarterly calls and all of them, all of that with them, so that like they hold you accountable for your actions. Because like otherwise, like oftentimes what happens in journaling and all, you set up a goal but you never reach there, and like it's just you who's interacting with the journal, right? So it's nothing that really holds you accountable for that. So having this sort of personal board is really important, and you can reflect a lot of thoughts and feelings with them about like how to, like if you have like a goal of developing a positive attitude, it's really important to be surrounded by positive environment, positive people, because I think that's really, really important. And then also get time to reflect on like what worked, what didn't work. So having this sort of personal board or mentors is really important to like develop any skill set that you put your mind to.
Right. Thank you for that. And Wendy, thoughts on what's the one thing they could do?
Yeah, I think finding someone or some people to emulate. When I was a young person, that's something I did. I looked at a few people. I thought about, and I was a bit of a thinker. I thought about who I wanted to be, what I wanted to be like when I grew up. And then I looked at people and I liked this in this individual and that individual. And in some ways, it's a little bit of a composite of qualities I admired in people.
Right.
I also like this idea of having an accountability partner, as Ruchi's talking about, finding someone. If you're religious, it could be your pastor or someone in your church, or a teacher or other mentor or an older sibling or cousin or what have you, but finding someone who can hold you accountable and share your dreams and what you aspire to become, and have people hold you to standards of behavior. I think that's pretty powerful.
Thank you, Andy. All right, so let's move on to grit. I believe we're approaching our final 12 minutes or so. Let me start off by asking, is grit and perseverance the same, or are there like subtle differences between the two that people need to know of? This is just open to the panel. Anyone who wants to add to that?
Varun, could you say it again, please? Because we had some difficulty with the connection.
Oh, all right, no worries. No, I was asking if grit and perseverance were the same, or do they go hand in hand? Because the words are usually used interchangeably, but grit has a lot, as much more weight than perseverance. Is it, or am I getting that wrong? Any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to kick off.
Yeah, sure. Go for it. So, this is just open to the panel.
It's a very good question. They go hand in hand, in my opinion. I think, and I would like to talk about my experience as well to explain what grit is. Yeah, I'm born in Qatar. I was born in Qatar, and it's a very conservative culture, as you know. I was lucky that my father was liberal, so I was sent to Germany to study. And when I came from Qatar and went to another environment, I had a cultural shock. Right. And in this cultural shock, was two things. Either, I keep going. I didn't know the language. There was a language barrier, a cultural barrier, and I had no society I used to have before. So you came in this environment, and then there are two options. Either you set the long goal and you try actually to make the best out of it, with more persistence and determination to succeed, because you know that if you don't succeed, you will go back to the same environment, which wasn't bad, but you don't want to fail, obviously. So grit is really a way of taking setbacks. This is at least my definition, taking setbacks in your life, but you keep going because you have a longevity target which you would like to achieve. And that was really, I didn't have the grit when I came to Germany, for example. I learned it through tough decisions I had to make myself, and also it's a failure, but also success. So the first two decisions weren't helpful, but I learned from them, from the setbacks, and I moved on. And nobody really, when I was there, and after I finished, nobody thought that I would have a chance to find a job at a corporate world in Germany, because ethnic minority, it's not my culture, etc. And I studied engineering, which is another add-on difficulty in the engineering world in Europe. I know in Asia probably is different, is male-dominated industry. So it is really this longevity of being persistent and determined to achieve your goal gives you the grit to do so. And I think that would be my definition, is really the long-term goal and persistence. And there are lots of studies, fair enough. I was reading about it yesterday because actually it inspired me to read about it when I saw the title of the podcast. They always ask themselves, you have, in the student world, for example, you have people with high IQ, people with a medium IQ, and others, and they were always wondering, it is not the IQ which will take you further, because there are others who maybe not having a high IQ, but they still perform even better. And that brings also, again, the grit discussions, which is actually coming more and more now in the corporate world. Is it really only about IQ, or there are other elements important for the corporate to look into their new member of teams, which is the grit and the longevity for long-term achievement?
Sure. Wendy, Dr. Ritchie, anyone
Yeah, I think like for me, like grit is like having a lot of conviction in what you're doing. Like so having like a purpose, a why, and having passion for what you're doing. Perseverance is something like if you're given a job, you have to do it. Yeah, you'll do it
Mm,
like no matter what. That's like it. The slight difference would be like if you're really passionate about it, then you don't really even care about any of the consequences. You'll definitely like work towards it. That's great. And even if you face any challenges and all, you'd like to learn
sure.
from the challenges and work and navigate your way forward, I think. And that's why like grit is really really important in the startup environment, because if you don't have that grit and that passion and the why, then there's so many struggles that you come across, and it's very very easy to just give up and move across. But and there's like since Varun, you're fond of telling jokes, I'll like
Yeah,
like to
please.
say a statement. Like there are a lot of examples where you read like, okay, this is a it took me 10 years to get there, to achieve this overnight success. So like it takes a lot of hard
Right,
work, and then
right.
in the end, like what people see is just the tip of the iceberg, just the
Sure.
success. But like it actually takes a lot of hard work, and the only reason you put in all that hard work is because you have the grit, the passion, the conviction that this is something that will work out, and this is something that I really want to do. So it's more like a marathon than a sprint. I think that's
Mm,
my definition of grit.
absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Reddy. Wendy, your thoughts on grit?
For me, grit is really it's that indomitable spirit. I will not give up. I will not give in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Perseverance, you sort of slog through and you get through.
Mm,
But grit says, hold on. What is it? Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, talks about holding on when there's nothing in you but the will that says, hold on.
right.
I
Mm,
often tell the story of a woman named Immaculée Ilibagiza from Rwanda. During the Rwandan Holocaust, when Hutu was slaughtering Tutsi, this woman, Immaculée, a Hutu, was hidden by a Tutsi priest in his indoor bathroom, hidden there for about 8 months with about 10 other women.
mm,
And I invite people to think about number one and number two, etc. You living in this one room, and a few times a week, he could perhaps move aside the furniture and slide some food to them. She emerged after about 10 months, 28 pounds lighter,
mm,
to discover that her mother and father and all but one of her siblings had been macheted to death. She proceeded to travel by foot to the neighboring country with her one sibling and some other surviving neighbors.
right.
They came upon a band of marauders, none older than about 11 years old, who talked about should we rape them and then kill them or just kill them. And she looked at this young boy and recognized him as a boy from her village and willed him to let her live. And after a while, he looked away and they made it to the border. She ended up in the USA. She wrote a book called Left to Tell, became
Mm,
a protege of the late Dr. Wayne Dyer. A survival story like no other, and the very epitome of what grit is, because she
right.
is now married and a parent. And I said, I could not imagine surviving such a situation and
Sure.
having the nerve to fall in love and marry and
Yeah.
carry on with life. And so for me, yeah, grit is that indomitable will, regardless of what we face. We will not surrender. And perseverance, you get through, but
Mm.
grit is just really extraordinary. It's the difference between making it and perhaps barely getting by.
That's quite powerful, Wendy. Thank you for sharing that. So I think we have time for a couple more questions. So my question is, when I did my research on grit, and grit, like you rightly said, is a fascinating topic, and it's more than just persevering. Um, it seems the literature talks about how you can teach children to build grit in them. But what about adults? What about adults who've been left behind, sort of? How can they now in their late adulthood, learn to develop grit. Is there any thoughts or any advice or to those adults? How would you approach them? Whether it's in a corporate setting, it could be a friend, a relative. Any thoughts on that?
My jury is somewhat out because there are people to whom I have told the story of Immaculate Ilibagiza, and
Right.
they either are unmoved by it or say, I could never do that. And so there's a part of me that believes that you have to have some inkling of a kind of ingredient that gives rise to grit.
Right.
And so I think it's likely that there are some people who are not gritty and don't have that indomitable will and will yield and succumb. And I think that there are some people who are hardwired and conditioned and invented with that grittiness in them and the makings of it. That's my thinking.
Right. Thank you, Wendy. Iman, Dr. Ruchi, any thoughts?
I agree with Wendy. I think I saw lots of examples in the corporate world and also in my personal life where unfortunately you see people who can get the grit in their life. And then examples I saw with people going to, they take drugs, for example, to try to get some of grits or others, which is really sad. So in my opinion, you need to be born with it, this willingness to live and the survival, effect. It will keep you going. So I really struggle to see how you could learn it. You may be patient to get through things, but I think the grit, and especially the story what Wendy mentioned, you have to have the will of power to keep going. And I think this is something in you, in your personality, rather than something you could develop or achieve in your older life. But maybe Rishi has a different opinion.
Yeah, I was thinking like it's if you sort of take small baby steps to develop like self-discipline and all, it could be like learning a new instrument, a musical instrument, or learning a new skill, or maybe completing an online course. These are small things, but like it helps you develop all of these skills that we talked about: passion, attitude, and grit. Because like as and when you complete like the small landmarks and go reach towards the end, it gives you some sense of like a sense of passion as well. Like if you are able to play a song, I think that's something that gives you like positive feedback and helps you on. So I think like having such positive improvements in your life on a daily basis and having like goals set up for you, I think, and definitely all those goals should portray like what's the why that you're looking for. Because if you don't have passion, then there's no point of even talking about grit, because grit is all about passion. So I think like having these habits of journaling, self-discipline, and working towards the small goals, towards like what you really want to do in your life, and finding that why, that's really important to get hold of grit.
Sure. Thank you. All right, so I'm afraid we're almost out of time. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask my panel one question to end on a positive note. So if there was one takeaway message that our audience should walk away from, rather walk away with today, what should that one takeaway message be?
I could also start.
Yeah, sure.
Set up your vision and see your long-term goals in front of your eyes. Have a mentor and never give up.
All right. Thank you. Very powerful. Dr. Ruchi, Wendy?
Yeah, I think and developing a growth mindset and like finding your why, that's really important. And then it's really important to talk about it, having that personal board to keep you accountable for that, and then moving towards that. I think that's some way in which you can make like good progress. Because like if you just keep it to yourself, then it's like at times you like give some leeway to yourself.
Sure. Wendy, final thoughts? Takeaway message?
I would offer cultivate mindfulness. Be intentional about dropping in on yourself. and about your habits and your choices and how you show up. Aware that you've got a finite time, and hopefully you are invested in some kind of meaningful legacy, and let that be your impetus.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Wendy. Well, with that said, I'm afraid we are out of time and we come to a close of today's conversation on patience, attitude, and grit. Can they be learned? So big thank you to our guests, Wendy, Dr. Ruchi, Iman. Thank you so much for being with us here today. It's been a pleasure. Do stay back a few minutes after our live session has ended for a short debrief. So at the same time, a big shout out goes to our Luminary team and to our audience who tuned in today. Thank you so much for joining us. And another reminder to all our viewers, all our past episodes of This, That, and the Other and our other webinar series are available on Luminary Learning Solutions YouTube page. So do swing by our YouTube page and don't forget to like our videos and hit that subscribe button. So do tune in next week, because next week we'll be talking about another topic that may be a little controversial, because we're going to be talking about MBAs and DBAs in the corporate world. Are they a requirement or just an adornment? So don't forget to tune in next week. I'm Varun Chandra Mohan. Thank you for joining us. See you next Saturday.